It's been 2.5 years since the release of Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, the game which brought the series back to its roots, and then some. Since then we've had the Resident Evil 2 remake, as well as various ports and DLC for other games in the series, and as we inch ever so closer to 2020, it seems likely that a new game in the series will be shown to us very soon, and while it will probably be the Resident Evil 3 remake, it's no secret that Resident Evil 8 is and has been in development for quite some time, which raises the question not of if the game's happening, but more how the game's happening. Resident Evil 7 was the first game to introduce a first-person perspective. Well, you know, the first real game. It did so for two reasons. Firstly, because Sony made a new VR headset and needed a reason for people to buy it. But more importantly, fans grew tired of the shooting galleries that were Resident Evil 4, 5 and 6, as well as its many spin-offs. Now I'm not implying that Resident Evil 4 was anything other than groundbreaking or amazing, it's one of my favourite games too, but it's no lie that it started the series down the road that became this.
What the fuck is going on?
Yes, I know, 5 and 6 are the two best-selling games in the series, but for the most part, it wasn't Resident Evil fans who bought those games. It was fans of this. It's not the public's fault either. Obviously, if Capcom made the series into a third-person action shooter, well then fans of third-person action shooters are sure to gravitate in. But at what cost? With the Resident Evil name becoming somewhat of a joke in late 2012, Capcom knew they had to make a change. But they weren't brave enough to resort back to what started the series in the first place. Or were they? Shown at E3 2016, Resident Evil 7 Biohazard was announced to be shifting to a first-person perspective. Some met this with curiosity, intrigue or excitement. Others with hatred, claiming that they'd ruined the series, as if Capcom hadn't already ruined the series with recent games. That's just the thing though. Most people that started to hate 7 were fans that boarded the ship during the recent years of the franchise and didn't get what made Resident Evil popular in the first place. And funny enough, those who enjoyed the early games in the series praised 7's reveal for the most part, me being one of them. To be fair though, early demos for the game had me worried too, with its inclusion of somewhat supernatural themes, mannequins teleporting around, a ghost girl appearing behind you. It all felt more like something from Silent Hill.
Here lie Squidward's hopes and dreams.
Luckily that was just the demo, and the finished project went on to become one of the greatest games in the series. It did what new entries in old series are meant to do. Take that classic gameplay and just modernise it. One thing that was great about 7 was how the shift to first person can help make you feel that sense of dread and claustrophobia that hasn't been felt since the early games. Some people say the fixed cameras of the old games got in the way, constricted your view and made them harder to play. Well, survival horror games aren't meant to be easy. Imagine how boring Silent Hill 2 would be if James Sunderland could just see the monsters coming around every corner and then blow their heads off. Kinda defeats the point, huh?
That's cheating!
And while I'd argue that fixed cameras work just fine, I understand some people just can't wrap their heads around it, and that's why 7 is the perfect balance of old and new. Some brushed it aside as just a copy of every other first-person horror game that came before it, but in reality, it was actually a callback to the older games. I'm not even talking about the fact that Capcom themselves said they wanted to make Resident Evil 1 a first-person game, but the PlayStation's hardware just couldn't do it at the time. I'm referring to the fact that first-person is as restrictive as you can get without fixed cameras. I'm by no means saying it's perfect. you still lose the ability to control what the player sees, just like you do with third person, but that sense that it's really you there facing off against these threats, that in part makes up for it. Breaking away from gameplay though, 7 was great in other categories as well. Its story was cliche as hell, and it clearly borrowed from Silent Hill 2. But it was a nice departure from the drawn out global politics that we're meant to try and follow in 6. Ethan himself is a bland character, but that's purely by choice. The game's director stated this was because an overly intrusive character would have gotten in the way in a VR game. But I'd like to add something else. Ethan's dialogue is a nice callback to the original.
What the fuck? Well, that's special.
Nobody would have that reaction to seeing this. It sounds stupid and cheesy, just like the older games.
You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
Speaking of which, it's clear just to see how much inspiration 7 took from the original. Outside of the mansion setting, weight-based puzzles to gain the shotgun, and pausing to check your health condition, the game shares a plethora of similarities with its survival horror grandfather. Switching the story between Ethan and Mia sections not only creates a nice change of pace in the story, but also calls back to the A and B scenarios with Jill and Chris. Actually, now that I mention Chris, let's talk about him. After the final boss has been defeated, a helicopter full of soldiers arrive, and on it happens to be none other than Chris Redfield. Now obviously, one would think with a new generation of hardware, a new engine, and implementation of facial motion capture, it's surely expected that Chris would look different. But that didn't stop those 5 and 6 fans. I slowly started to find out afterwards that I was in the minority when it came to liking Chris's new design, with people claiming it looked terrible, with some even starting the hashtag #NotMyRedfield. Well, I'm sorry, but this isn't the Redfield we're looking for either.
Listen, sweetheart. You're here to pour drinks and look pretty. So how about you shut your mouth?
Even I can admit there's something enjoyable and comical about the Chris we see in these games. But this is the real Chris Redfield. And to be perfectly honest, the new version, to me anyway, looks like an older version of Chris from the Resident Evil 1 remake. In fact, as it turned out, the hatred for characters extended beyond Chris. A lot of people questioned why they couldn't just use classic, well-known characters. Why did they have to force in these new ones to play as? You see, what people don't seem to realise is that big-name characters like Chris, Jill, and Leon are all in their early to late 40s. And while I don't want to see any of them disappear anytime soon, I do think it's nice that 7 ushered in a new set of characters. The reason I bring all this up is as time moves on, it's looking less and less like 7 will get the sequel it deserves. This in part is due to all the negative feedback that 7 got from those who only started playing the series when it became Gears of War. And also, because the Resident Evil 2 remake, a third-person game I might add, has gained more in sales in its first few months on the market than 7 has up until now. And since Capcom seem to have a history of taking the series where the money is, I'd say that doesn't leave a true sequel to 7 with much hope. The RE2 remake is by no means a bad game. I did enjoy it quite a bit. I'd probably go as far to say I loved it, even with my preference towards fixed camera angles. But it being the direction the series is going to go in, well, let's just say I'm more worried than hopeful.
Happy birthday, dear Hudson.
Whoa, whoa, whoa!